Thank you for coming here today. We're going to spend some time together. I'm going to tell you my story. I used to be a student too, you know. I often wish I was a student still. You have so many years ahead of you, and the world is very different now. You can do so many more things. You all have with you laptops and iPhones and Wi-Fi devices. It's just a fantastic place to be. So it was quite different when I stumbled across the web. So I'm going to tell the story how I got into this and how my contribution, which is CSS, how it was invented and why it was invented. So I then had to ask you, how many of you know about CSS? You know about it already. That's good. That's a good start. How many of you have written CSS yourself? You're great. You're great. Super. Wonderful. So I'm going to do my CSS thing. And then afterwards, we're going to do a little bit of Opera promotion. We have with us Chenis, who's the product lead for Opera Desktop. He works out of Poland, but he's from Kazakhstan. So Moscow is a natural place for him to be. So he'll also be here to answer questions about the version of Opera that we released today. Opera version 41 was released today, so you can download it on your computers. That's the desktop version, that is. If you have a mobile phone, I hope you have already Opera Mini or the Opera Browser. We have several versions for phones on your device. But it's not really about promotion. What I'm here to talk about really is the web, why the web is important and how small little computer languages can help. And this document is where I got started. This was written in 1994 when I came to CERN. CERN is a physics laboratory in Switzerland, outside of Geneva, where they do a lot of stuff with physics. They try to detect how the universe is put together, the subatomic particles. They send these atoms to collide at very high speed, and then they try to see what comes out of there. And in order to detect those small particles, they have this great machine. This is the world's biggest machine. It runs underground, and you can see the scale of it by looking at this man here. This is an enormous machine to detect very small particles. And in order to analyze what comes out of these detectors, they need a lot of computers. So CERN have always been very advanced with computer technology. And one of the computer scientists at CERN is called Tim Berners-Lee. He's no longer there, but he was there for many years. And this is a picture I took when I came there in 1994, because I had heard about his project. I had heard about this World Wide Web thing. I heard about it in 1992, which was before most people heard about it. This was before the internet, you know, was used on a daily basis by almost everyone. This was when this was still a tool for scientists, more a plaything for scientists where only scientists knew about it and scientists could communicate. And he wanted to make it easier to communicate. He wanted to make it easier for scientists to write papers and to communicate the results of their research. I said CERN is outside of Geneva. Geneva is a fantastically beautiful place. Here you have the Alps in the background. This is the Mont Blanc. And you have the cows there are grazing in the fields. The detector that I mentioned is actually underneath the fields here. The cows don't know much about what goes on underneath them, but they can look at the Jura Mountains in the background. This picture is taken in May. It's a fantastically beautiful place. Now, inside the CERN laboratory, it's not quite as beautiful. This was built up after the war, and the buildings are not so inspiring in some ways, but still the content there is quite good. I can't say anything about what goes on in those pipes. That's probably some physics stuff. But I can tell you a little bit about the computer in the corner. This was the first public web terminal that was set up. We set it up there because not all the students that came to CERN had a computer at the time. They could borrow one sometimes, but it was easier for us to show the web to them when they could just sit down on this terminal. So when I came to CERN, one of the first things I did was to help set up this computer in the corner. And here you can see the the picture, this is kind of the information, the bulletin about the web. It says, World Wide Web, you click, we do the rest. That was kind of the marketing slogan for the web. And I think we can conclude that it wasn't really the marketing campaign that made the web succeed. We have better marketing people with us today, actually. One of them is sitting there, Henrik. He's from PR marketing in Oslo. He can do much better. But even though we didn't have that great marketing, we still were able to make the web grow, and it continues to grow. And today it's an important part of all our lives. That's where we go to do banking, probably. You do banking, online banking in Russia? Yeah? Where you find maybe, you know, your spouse, where you read news. Almost anything you do in life has some connection with the web these days. And that's good. I think that's good, generally good. And that means that we as technologists, we who kind of build the components of this, the underlying foundations, we need to make sure we protect it and develop it further and make sure it does good things. This is what the web looked like in the first browser that many people use. This is from the Mosaic browser. All pages looked like this, basically. There was black text on a gray background, and then you had these fantastic things, these blue things, links that you could click on, and you could go from one machine, one place in the world, to another machine, another place in the world. And that was totally, incredibly fantastic, and gave us a new sense of freedom. But of course, today, if you look at this page, it doesn't look that exciting. It's sort of a little monotonous. It's sort of old-fashioned in a way. And designers who came to the web, even at that point, they said, okay, links are great. I get the links thing. That's important. But I still want to be able to say something about colors and fonts. Many of them came from a desktop publishing background. They had Apple Macintosh computers. They had laser printers. They had a lot of fonts. They had colors, some of them. So they were used to these kinds of design things, and they couldn't find them on the web. Because on the web, the language that Tim Berners-Lee had invented was called HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, and it didn't say anything about fonts. It said something about the meaning of elements. This is a little sample. This is the H1 elements, one of the basic building blocks in the HTML language. And the start tag there is H1, and then it has these brackets around it, and then comes the headline itself, and then comes the end tag, which has the brackets and the slash. And it took me about 15 seconds to explain that to you. Of course, I didn't have to explain it to you because you know it already, but you can explain HTML pretty much in 15 seconds, maybe a minute if you need to have nested elements and such. But writing this stuff is very, very easy. So that was one reason why the web took off, why we didn't need marketing campaigns, was that the languages themselves were so easy to learn. And even if you didn't want to write it yourself, you could always steal some document from somebody else and change it. It's kind of the world's biggest open source movement because the source code is available. You know, in your browser, you just do view source and you get to it. We'll look at that a bit afterwards. So the simplicity is very important. The fact that HTML had universal semantics was important. Semantics is a difficult word, but it means meaning, basically. H1 says something about the meaning of the element. It doesn't say anything about the presentation. It doesn't say anything about whether it should be presented on a computer screen or be printed somewhere. It's independent of the media. And it's also an open standard. The fact that HTML was released to the public openly was very, very important. If Tim Berners-Lee had sort of patented it and kept it for himself, created a company maybe, I don't think that would have worked. It wouldn't have succeeded if he charged money for it. That's another reason why this has spread so far, is that he let it out for anyone to use for free. And we've seen a lot of those movements in the years after the early 90s. For example, the computer I'm using is running Linux, and many of the phones you're having is running Android, which is also Linux. So we have many examples of these open source projects that have been very successful. So that's good, but there were some things were missing when I came to HTML, because we had, like I said, we had the designers who came and said, I really want to use the web, but I have to be able to say something about fonts and colors. And they also said, you know, if I can't do fonts and colors in HTML, then I'll have to use images. This is kind of the atom bomb in the web world. This is the ultimate threat. I'll start to use images. That means they would take a picture of the text and put that picture online. And if you take a picture of text, then you can get anything you want. You can do any color, any font, whatever, but you miss out on many things. You miss out on being able to analyze the text. Google wouldn't have been able to index the documents. You would have been basically back to a fax machine, a facsimile machine. I don't know if any of you have used a fax machine ever. Probably not. Some of you are smiling. You know what it is? You know what a fax machine is? Oh, that's good. That's good. You're smart. But it's still, the fax machine would have been the world's biggest fax machine, but it wouldn't have done us much good because we wouldn't have been able to search in all those fantastic documents on the web. So keeping HTML as a text-based language was very important, but we also had to be able to say to designers, yes, we'll give you the fonts you want, we'll give you the colors you want, you give you the typography, we just had to find a way to combine them. And that's really why CSS was invented. CSS was invented so that we wouldn't have to destroy HTML, so that we can continue using HTML as a text-based language and also add the features that the designers wanted. So like HTML, CSS, they're kind of like cousins. Like HTML, CSS is very simple. It's presentational though. It does say something about the presentation. It's very concrete with presentation. Here's a little sample, you know, font size 14 pixels, color red. The syntax here is, it's not the same as HTML, it's a different syntax, but you can easily understand it as well. And it takes me just about 15 seconds to explain that those two sentences there apply to the HTML element, because HTML is put in front of the curly brackets. Like HTML, CSS is also an open standard. I never tried to copyright it or patent it. It wouldn't have succeeded then. The only reason why these things succeed is you get other people to join in with you and develop it. And they will only do so generally if you promise to make it open. So that's good. And since almost all of you have written CSS, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but say you have a little bit of text and you want to style it. You can set font size. That's where we started. You can set font style. You can set font family. The code you can see on the top there, of course, and then you see the result on the screen there. You can set background color. And I tell you, this may look very simple now, but in 1994, being able to set the background color, that was like, wow, really great. Because then people had been living with that hard-coded gray color of Mosaic, and we could liberate them from that color. That was really cool. Another thing was cool, that was border, and being able to set the color of borders. It looks a little dated now, one has to admit, but it was really, really hot in 1995. Text shadow, that was part of the first version of CSS, CSS1, but it wasn't implemented by the first browsers. It's a little tricky to implement, actually, but it's very important to have. These are effects that people used a lot of Photoshop to do these kinds of things. What you see here, of course, I'm using a browser to run this presentation, and you can see that I was able to select the text there. So there is text that's readable underneath the code here, and then we've given it a little bit of shadow. And people, like I said, they use Photoshop or other image programs to make these effects, but using images is really, really bad. It can't be indexed, it takes a lot of space, it's a lot of maintenance. If you're going to translate a word into some other language, you had to create a new image. So we generally try to avoid that. So we try to, in CSS, it's been a goal to try to take the things that designers wanted and give it to them so that they can easily express it. And if you saw the change there, here, the code to create that text shadow is written on top. Text shadow, 10 pixel black. That means basically the offset in the X and Y direction are both 10 pixels. And then you set the color of the shadow, it should be black. But if we give it one more number, in addition to X and Y, we also give it a blur radius, then we can actually create these, these soft shadow effects. Because this is something designers were very conscious about. They said, oh, no, it can't be a hard edge, it has to be a soft edge. Okay, well, and then we give it another color. The RGB scheme there, the hash F79, looks a little cryptic, but can also be learned in a few minutes once you know about the red, green, and blue color space. And then we discovered you could do some actually really cool things by setting, no X and Y offset. You say that you see there's 0, 0 at the top there, and then setting a quite large blur radius, 20 pixel, and give it another color name. You could actually create a shadow. All we see is a shadow here. We don't see the text itself because the color of the text is white, but we can still see the outline of the text. That's kind of a sort of a stencil effect. Nobody had really thought about that, I think, but it came into being. And it's very easy to write. It's a one-line sentence up there. And if I asked you to change the color of that one to something else, you would know how to do it. And you would also know how to make a wider shadow or a smaller shadow or add a little bit of offset again. It's very, very simple to learn. This time I'd like to just show you, why is this useful? Do you really have to learn CSS? And I think the answer today is no. You don't really have to learn about CSS. But every time you go to a website, you will know that your browser, I'm just picking a random site here now, and I didn't really want the Chrome ad there, but if we go to the view source, let's see. Can somebody help me? Where's the view source? It should be Control U, should it? Is it still the same? Okay, let me try. Yes, it worked. Thank you. Okay, good. It's good to remember the shortcuts. So this is the source code of a random site, and let's see if we can see any CSS here. There it is. Do you see there? Link rel style sheet, static CSS. Here they've written some CSS, and we click on this, and we go to the CSS code. So often today, if you're going to be a web designer, you can choose many frameworks that hide the underlying CSS from you, just like you can hide the underlying HTML code. If you use Facebook or Vkontakte or other, very high-level tools for publishing, you will never see any tags at all. But I do think that if you are going to be computer technicians, engineers, scientists, you should really know about the basic stuff. Just like the scientists at CERN try to see, the atomic particles, you should know about this language and understand why it's there and how you can change it. And if you really want to optimize pages, if you really want to make them small so that they load very fast, then you should maybe even write style sheets by hand. It's a little bit like assembly language, though. There are tools that can hide assembly language for you, but sometimes you need to get there, and in any case, it's good to be able to understand how things work. CSS3 came along. CSS3 was, by then, we had kind of gotten to a point where people really started to use CSS for real, and we had even more designers come, and some of them said, we really want rounded borders, Hokon. And I said, we probably don't need rounded borders, do we? We have more important things on our lists. Rounded borders, who needs rounded borders? That's sort of a 70s design, we're past that point. Rounded borders are out, I would say. Of course, I was wrong. People really wanted rounded borders, and they found good use for them. So, okay. Rounded borders made it into CSS3. And I've discovered it's actually pretty cool. You can, again, by changing just one line of code up there, you can change the presentation of that little string very much. Our eyes are very visual. We are very visual beings. We react immediately. We can see the difference between those two presentations. Whoops. Let's see. And if I change one more thing up there, I add a slash and another value, I can change the radius so that it only appears in some of the corners. And this is really just visual fluff. Google will not change how they index this document, whether it has, the same radius in all four corners, or different horizontal and vertical, or different corner radiuses. It's all the same, but to humans, this is important. And this is what designers make a living from. They create these design guidelines. For example, for a company, if a company changes its logo and wants new colors and want to, tell the world that we are reshaping ourselves, we have something new, they will make changes like this. So in order for a designer to express what he or she wants to express, he needs something in the toolbox. And CSS is meant to be that language, so that they can change the CSS code, but they shouldn't have to touch HTML. We shouldn't have to add new HTML codes. Those should be HTML tags. They should be unchangeable almost, but we can add more stuff to the CSS. And CSS3 transitions was one such thing that we added, because a lot of people said, we want to do animations. And then some people said, okay, we can do that through JavaScript. And yes, you can do that through JavaScript, but if a lot of people want to do the same animations, it's really stupid to have to write JavaScript, because JavaScript is much harder language. JavaScript is a programming language, and programming languages are hard, I think. I think no more than 0.1% of this world are good programmers. It's a very small elite that can be good at programming. Those that can do CSS, it's a much bigger group, at least by a factor of 10. So if we can make it easy to do stuff, then we'll try to do that. And what I've done here in those 3 lines of code, I've written a little style sheet that will do something which is quite advanced actually. It will flip that figure and do so in a certain pattern. So the code is quite easy to understand. First I have the HTML tag image, which selects an SVG figure. SVG is a graphics format. That's where you find the lion there. This is the Norwegian state symbol, by the way. And I shouldn't really make him spin. That's actually illegal according to Norwegian law. But I'm in Russia, so it doesn't matter. And then I set a transition. I say on the image element, whenever there is a transition, it should use 1 second, 1s. And here comes the transition itself. And the transition is hover. Those are predefined. This is a predefined transition in the language. So I said whenever I hover, that means whenever I take the pointer and put it over the lion here, I want a transformation. And the transformation should be to rotate this lion by minus 360 degrees. And I trust that you are so smart that you would know intuitively, if I told you as an exercise, how would you make the lion spin the other way around? I bet you would know right away that you would just, remove that minus sign, right? Yeah, you nodded, that's good. So we're trying to make the easy things easy to do, and the things that a lot of people want to do, we want to make it possible. Of course, there are things that you can't do in CSS, you can't do in HTML. There are times when you have to resort to JavaScript or other formats. So that's okay. The web has room for many things, but I do think it's important that we try to keep things simple and try to make it available to everyone in common browsers. Web fonts is another such thing which has been highly requested. In the beginning, when Microsoft came to the web, when they wanted to do a web browser, they took with them some fonts. This was a great thing. This is probably the best thing Microsoft ever did. They came to the web with these 10 fonts and said, we can donate this, we'll give it to you. We'll let you use them all over the web, on Windows machine and also on Macintosh and Linux. And that made it possible for people to write a web page using HTML, using CSS, and you could make sure pretty much that it would look almost the same on all those different screens. Because even on Linux, they were able to add these fonts to the distribution. So these are high quality fonts. Microsoft spent a lot of money paying highly skilled font makers to make these fonts. So they've been very good for the web. But when we had used these for about 10 years, we started to get a little bit sick and tired of them. You know, if you read everything in Times New Roman, you want some variety, and that's what these designers wanted. They say, you know, can't we do more fonts? And we had thought of ways of doing this, and we could, again, just use a one-liner to do so. What we did is use the strength of the web, use hyperlinks. We can point to font resources out there. We can point to either to style sheets that refer to fonts or the fonts files themselves. So what I'm doing here in those 2 lines of code is that I'm importing a style sheet, and then in that style sheet it tells me where I can find the font called Angel. And then the browser downloads that font and shows it to me. And there are thousands and thousands of fonts out there. Some very good font designers have decided, you know, I'm not going to charge for this. I want this to be used by everyone for free, just like the HTML and CSS language. And here I'm using some fonts by Dieter Steffmann, a German designer. He's done some great fonts that you know, look very, very particular. I mean, you probably don't want to use the Cardiff font for, you know, your thesis. And I'm not sure it comes in Cyrillic either. Some of these fonts are somewhat limited. But if you're going to, you know, write a new logo for a company or a sign for a shop, then maybe using Cardiff could make sense. It says something about the text beyond just the text itself. And I mentioned the Cyrillic issue. That's another thing about fonts. Cyrillic is actually quite easy. You have an alphabet. You have a limited number of characters. And it's quite easy to support Cyrillic scripts on computers. Just like in Norwegian, we have 3 more characters in the Latin alphabet. My name has an O, as a ring over the A, so it was a little troublesome in the beginning as well, but it's relatively easy to do. But there are scripts on this planet that are much more difficult, both because they have many more characters in them, but also because they are not so well supported by computers. We are in the rich part of the world. Other people live in poorer parts of the world where they don't have as many computers, and they, especially in the beginning, they didn't have distributions of the operating system that came with those fonts. So even if they had a computer, they wouldn't have the fonts on that computer to display texts in their own language, and that's a problem. Because I think we should really think of the web as worldwide. It's in the name, World Wide Web. So we need to make sure they have the fonts. So this message was very heartwarming to me when I saw it, that the Wikipedia project had actually started using web fonts to deploy fonts to languages in India. And they list these 11 Indic languages where Wikipedia now is using web fonts. So that, I think, is a great thing. Here's an example of one such page, so that people can read Wikipedia in their own language. I think that's kind of the basic level that we can provide to everyone in this planet, is to give them access to Wikipedia in their pocket, in their own language. I should also mention some problems we had along the way. There were times when I thought that we're never going to be able to get this thing out the door, because we struggled for a long time with how CSS and how pages written in CSS, how they were displayed differently in the different browsers. So, for example, some of these circle things, some of these border radius that I showed you, they were displayed differently. And it's normal in software development. Whatever you develop, you have bugs. and you have to go through cycles and fix. What's more complex here is that you have several competing vendors who are trying to do the right thing, kind of, but they have different shipping schedules, and they have different priorities, and they have limited number of programmers, and sometimes they don't know about the problems. So we ended up with a lot of people saying, oh, I can't use CSS because it looks different in all browsers. I want to use an image instead. Images look the same. And that's kind of a, no, don't use images. We're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. And fortunately, we got some help from the Web Standards Project. These specifications, like CSS, HTML, they're developed in an organization called W3C, World Wide Web Consortium. But the World Wide Web Consortium doesn't have all the resources it takes in order to do the debugging of all these languages. So we had help from the Web Standards Project, which is a group of volunteers. It could have been, anyone can join. And they helped us to do a lot of testing. So we knew just about where the problems were. And I was working for Opera Software at that point in time. After I had been at CERN, I realized that in order to do CSS right, I had to join a browser vendor, and Opera was there. I'm Norwegian. So I came back to the Opera guys and said, I want to join the Opera company. So I was kind of in one camp. And we were really struggling with Microsoft at the time. But I still thought, I had to send out a challenge to Microsoft so that we get CSS right. And that became the ACID 2 challenge. ACID 2 is a test page. It's a very difficult page. It's one where if you get it right, this is what the page looks like. It is a smile. It's very recognizable. And it says, a friendly greeting, hello world. And the problem was that Microsoft, if you open that page in IE, in IE6, this is what it looked like. It's pretty bloody, You can kind of see that it's a face there. It has two eyes, and it has a mouth, but it's something dribbling here. And of course, it's very bloody, the whole thing. So it's a disaster. And then Microsoft came and said, we're going to do IE7. So we said, OK, great. You're going to do IE7? Good. Well, here's the test. Make sure you fix all the problems. And then we waited, and then IE7 came along. And we were not so happy. Here they've added, here's a little window with a scroll bar. And I'm not sure if this is meant to be the nose, or yes, probably the nose up there with two eyes here. And then the dribbling, if you look at the dribbling carefully, it's even worse. So we said, ooh, what are we going to do? And we could have given up, but we didn't. With the help of the Web Standards Project and a lot of activists who came to conferences and asked Microsoft, Microsoft, when are you going to fix the problems in CSS? When are you going to get the ACID 2 test right? They were embarrassed, I think. So at some point, somebody inside Microsoft said, guys, we're just going to have to do it. And this is what it looked like in IE8. It's perfect. It's perfect. And that makes the world a lot better for designers and those who write pages, because now you could pretty much use everything there is in CSS2 and a lot of stuff in CSS3, and it works interoperably, that's a difficult word, interoperably between all the browsers. Firefox, Chrome, Opera, IE, the same page will look the same. There are still some stuff in there. There's always going to be bugs in software, but most of it works. So that's good. How are we doing on time? We have 40 more minutes. I have a few things more to talk about. I'm going to say a little bit more about the Opera browser, where we come from. As I said, I joined the Opera company. This was in 1998, so it's also a long time ago. That was actually a pretty good time to be in Scandinavia, because we had these two manufacturers, Nokia and Ericsson, next door in Sweden and Finland. And they were the biggest makers of mobile phones. And they were starting to build mobile phones that had bigger screens and color screens, and they were sort of interested in, maybe we could get a browser here. That was kind of obvious that you wanted to have a browser with you once the web became an important part of people's lives. I remember one Nokia manager, he was a baseball fanatic, and he just really wanted to have the baseball scores being visible on his Nokia phone. And we could give it to him, we could give him a browser. This is the best way to get baseball on your phone. Yes, let's do it, he said. So Opera started making browsers not just for computers, laptops and desktops, but also for phones. I think Opera runs on more phones than any other browser has ever done and will ever be able to do. And also we run Opera on a lot of devices, including TV sets and games consoles and such. And in 2005, we launched a product called Opera Mini, which does compression. It allows you to use a browser on your phone, but instead of the browser fetching the whole web page and rendering it on the screen, it actually just sends the URL over to a server in the network, and then that server will fetch it for you. And that's good because you can save time and you can save money. You save time by it being less data you need to transfer. We compress it on the server side. And you save money too because data costs money. And even though you may not pay per kilobyte anymore or per megabyte, you still have a limited quota of data on your data plans, so you want to have some compression there. And when we launched this, we had these articles come out. This is from Chicago. It turns out that Chicago, it has an advanced bus network, and they had their buses real time. They had GPS, and they were able to transmit where the buses were. So you could actually look at an interactive map and see where all the buses in Chicago was. And these newspapers were able to somehow get the log files from that service. And the journalists noticed that most of the users were actually in Norway. And they speculated, why the heck? And I'm going to read you this beginning of this article. Norwegians are either utterly fascinated with the comings and goings of the CTA buses, that's the buses in Chicago, or there just aren't enough recreational activities in the land of fjord and Viking ships. So, of course, you being so smart, you understand this already. This is not Norwegians looking at the buses in Chicago. This is actually people in Chicago freezing, waiting for the bus, picking up their handsets, checking when is the bus coming. But since they were using Opera Mini, all the traffic went through our service in Oslo. So that from the Chicago bus service servers, they saw the requests coming from Norway. So that's why, Norwegian dominated. The journalists weren't that smart. They didn't get it. Journalists aren't always. I have more trust in students than I have in journalists. Opera Mini has been a tremendous success for us, and we've actually recently just done some studies. How much have we saved? And this is fresh data coming out, being released today for Russia. It turns out that we have, in the last year, saved 26,000 terabytes of data. Okay, you know terabytes? Yeah? You have terabyte disks? Yeah? It's a lot of data. And if you translate that into money, how much money we've saved people on their mobile phones, it translates into 1 billion rubles. Isn't that right, Mikhail? With an average price per megabyte of 40 rubles per megabyte. Yeah? So it's a lot of money we're able to save here. So if you have a limited data plan, if you had to pay for it yourself, I recommend doing Mini. It's fast and it's good for your pocket. So that's wonderful. We've also done some more statistics. This is actually quite old statistics, but I bring it up because I want to run a little test with you, see if you're still awake. This is the top 10 list of countries from some years ago, where actually Russia was top. These are absolute numbers. We're measuring how much data goes through our Opera Mini servers, and Russia was on top here. And we could also see, since it's going through our servers, we can actually check what are the top sites in each country. And we see Vkontakte is top here. Yandex, of course, mail.ru. The top 10 handsets, that has changed quite a bit since 2011. And you may see that Russia is on top. Do you see what country is next? Indonesia, very good. Very good. So we're going to run through this list here. See what do you know flags? You know your flags? What's number 3? India, very good. Ukraine, come on, yes, quick. China? Not Zanzibar, no. No, not Zambia. South Africa, yes. NG? Nigeria, good. Vietnam? US? Brazil, good, excellent, let's go on. Come on, you can do that one. Belarus, UK, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Philippines, Poland, Kenya, Egypt, Bangladesh, Germany, you got it. You're almost as good as the 7th grade in Kiev that I tested this on. But it's interesting, I show this list because this shows that people are using this all over the world. It's not just the big rich countries, of course, Russia is big and rich kind of, but Indonesia is not that rich. People are still have handsets though, they still have mobile phones. And to think of that, a country like Egypt is ahead of Germany. Okay, so these are absolute numbers. It's not per capita, and we don't take into account desktop usage here. So I'm not saying that Egypt or Bangladesh is more advanced than Germany, but it does show that people in these places that we don't think about when we hear the word internet, they're actually there. This is the World Wide Web. And we've been able to see even more of that if we study the statistics from one period of time, from the Arabian Spring, the revolution in Egypt that happened. We could follow this from our servers, and we made this statistics afterwards. Before the revolution, we could see that they were using Opera Mini in Egypt, but going up and down a little bit, not that much. And then suddenly something happens. Maybe suddenly people realize that they can't trust the TV anymore. Maybe the TV only sends government-sponsored information. So we see the use of Opera Mini increases dramatically because they realize that they can get news from other sources. If you have a mobile phone, you can check news from abroad or go to Facebook and see what your friends are saying. So we had a dramatic increase, and then it's cut off. The government actually took down the internet in Egypt. They tried to stop the things from happening by turning off the internet because they saw that people got information that they didn't want them to have. And then a few days more, something again happens. We're not quite sure. We don't really know why they turned it back on again. Maybe people got too angry. So when they turn it back on, usage goes up again. And the most interesting thing, I think, with this statistic here is that it shows that when the internet comes back on, then usage establishes itself at a much higher level. So when people have started to use this thing and realize that they can get good data from it, then they continue to use it. And I'm not saying that this is good or bad. I'm not saying that what happened in Egypt was the right thing necessarily, but it does show that when people are in distress, the first thing they do these days is to pick up their phone and they go to the web. So it's become an essential part of being human, and we need to make sure we understand that. We need to make sure we take good care of the web. And that's why we've worked very hard over the last few years to offer new features to the web. In Opera, we can now do more things. The scenario is a little bit different than 20 years ago. We now have to be more concerned with our privacy, I think. There are we're being followed. There's kind of a surveillance economy. They live by following you around with cookies and advertisements and things. So we have developed some features. I don't know, would you like to present these, or should I try to demonstrate them? Shall I do that? You had to correct me. This is the guy personally responsible for leading this work. So, but I'm going to try and show you some of these things. And we're going to start with the VPN feature. I'll give you the list here, by the way. VPN, we have ad blocking, we have battery saver mode, and we have video pop out. And if the connection works here now, let's see. Let's start a new window and go to the settings. Ooh, I'm going to get them in Russian. Let's see. Yes, okay, it works. It's called VPN in Russia. I first had to turn on VPN, okay, and then I get a little thing here. And then once I have that, I can, it's turned on now, isn't it? Yes. And I can select the country. And if I select, for example, the Netherlands, I'm now being channeled, my traffic is being channeled through the Netherlands when I go to the web. Now, maybe there is a blocking on this network I'm on, but let's see if we go to, Google, let's see if we can get through here. It's still, we're using VPN, aren't we? I would have expected this to be in Dutch. What do you think?
We probably have some extra parameters.
Yeah.
In the browser.
Let's just see. Foobar, let's see. What is my IP? Yes, here you see, okay, I'm in Zuid-Holland. So Google remembered it probably had set some cookies to say that I was Russian. That's why it continued to give me results in Russian. But my IP address is now registered as coming from Holland. So that means if you want to check, the cost of an airline tickets, for example, if you buy it from abroad, you can use these features. Or if you want to post in a forum where you don't want it to be apparent that you come from Russia, you can use this feature. You can make it so that advertisers cannot trace you as easily as they can otherwise. We haven't invented VPN. It's not really our idea, but we think it's an essential tool to be an internet citizen of 2016. You need to have access to VPN. It should be in your toolbox, even if you don't turn it on. But if you are on an open network, if you bring your laptop to a cafe and just get on an open Wi-Fi network, it's not encrypted. And if you turn on VPN, it will encrypt everything. So it adds the level of protection if you are on an open network. Okay, that's good. So another thing we do is we do ad blocking. And now I'm going to go to one of my sites in Norway. This is a Norwegian newspaper. And well, okay, first we had to turn on ad blocking, right? Let's see. How do I do that in Russian? Is it called ad block? No? The first checkbox, of course. There we are. Now I turned it on. Okay. And I go to here. Ah, yes. Suddenly this thing here started appearing. This tells me that it has blocked ads. I click here, and it's blocked 4 ads. I think maybe the number is higher if I scroll down, right? Because sometimes they delay ad loading. That's good, actually. But you can see here that how many ads they block. So they now blocked 48 ads on this page. So if you go here, and we've actually built in a testing tool so that we can test to see, how long time does it take to load this page with and without ads. So we see that it's 31% faster when we load it without ads. And that's just the first part of the page. It would have been more if we had done all of that. But this is a tool that tells you, the user, how much you save in time and data when you use the ad blocking. And it's also a help for the newspapers, for those who use advertisements. They can actually fine-tune their ads, because I don't think they want to use a lot of capacity for this either. So they can actually use this as a tool to improve their page designs. Okay, and then we had the battery saver mode. And then I'm going to pull out the power here. I hope this is the power cable. And then comes the battery saver icon up, and I'm going to have to guess that it's the left one. Yeah? No? Was that wrong? Here it is. Now it's on. Yeah? So now it will actually, what it does is that it will notice, I'm running on battery power. I need to preserve power. If I, for example, had a YouTube video running in another tab here, it wouldn't keep on playing that. It would sort of put things, go to sleep, and only use energy on the things that I'm actually watching. So we've used some heuristics, used some smart tricks to try to save your battery, so that if you are in that cafe with a battery, it will actually last longer than it would do otherwise. Smart, huh? Yeah? Let's see if we can find the video about it, if we have it on YouTube. And we search for, let's see. There isn't much sound to this one. So you can just see what's going on there. And while you're watching that one, you can see that I'm using another feature of the Opera, new Opera. We have what we call video pullouts. You can actually take this video here, and it will keep on playing, even if you're not on the YouTube page anymore. So some of you are very good at multitasking. You can watch a video, on the side while you're doing other work. And this is great for that. You can just pull out that video. You get a handle, you pull it out, and you can do two things at once. Yeah? Is that great? Applause. That's good. Okay, I'm going to have to stop this thing here now and go back to my presentation. Okay. And maybe turn on power again. So I think we have 20 minutes. I have a few more slides, but maybe there are some questions now, either about CSS or about the Opera. Yeah?
Why we're still using CSS, but we have the CSS, the extensions for the CSS language.
Yes.
So that's more useful, I think, because we have variables and different features that are not.
Yes. So the question is, why do we have to use CSS, or why should we use CSS now that we have other frameworks like SAS and other syntactic frameworks on top of CSS? It's a good question, and the answer is no. You don't really have to use CSS. You can use SAS. SAS will give you a different syntax, and it will give you more power, and it will be more compact. Yes. So I would say, yes, you can use, if you're happy with that, use it. But you should also know that what the browser actually reads is CSS.
But why browsers still haven't included the SAS support? Or
That's also another good question. I think if we had started today, we probably would have said, yeah, we should have taken these in. Things like variables and more complex syntax they were kind of proposed, but we tried to make things very simple. I think that's really the answer. We tried to make sure it was very, very simple, and variables would have been more complex to implement, and it would require more testing. So in order to limit the amount of testing, it was hard enough to get the basic language through. If we'd started out with the more complex language, they might have said, this is too much, we're not going to do this at all. So it's kind of we gave them something very simple. Just take this, just eat this very simple little cake here, you know, and they grabbed the cookie. If we had come up with a big one, they would have said maybe too much. So that's the answer. But I do think that maybe we should have picked up more on the syntactic level. Instead of just thinking about what looks good on the screen, what are the visual features people are asking for. Maybe we should also look for syntactic. But then again, the problem was solved by somebody, and that solution works too. You can use SAS.
Thank you.
There are several questions, one there and one here. We can start here.
In addition to in addition to previous question, I want to ask, how do you see a future of CSS now?
Yeah.
How you think it would evolve?
Yeah. That's also a very good question. I have some slides that are showing kind of where I hope it will go. But I'm now, at this point, I'm just one of many. The CSS community is big. We have a lot of people coming with proposals. They have their own favorite features that they'd like to get in. Some people would like to do more color stuff. Some people would like to do, you know, more printed stuff. And the approach has been lately that, you know, you're able to write a module. They modularized CSS3 so that there's a module for paged media, and there's a module for this and module for that. And that gives everyone a chance to contribute. The problem is that browser makers don't have really time to implement all these new features. So there will have to be a selection. So amongst the maybe 40 new modules that are being worked on, I don't think more than perhaps 5 will survive. And those 5 will be chosen by probably the browser makers. They will have to sit down and say, what do you think we should do? Should we make sure that those who write games have the things they need, or those who write books have the things they need? The market will in a way decide. But I also think it's important to say that you can also be part of this. It's easy to be part of the style mailing list, for example, where discussions are had. And some of the things can also be implemented in JavaScript. Like one has been able to extend the syntax through programming. You can also add support for some new features by way of JavaScript. That means you have to include a JavaScript library, and that means it's not an ideal solution. Ideally, I'd like to have native support for all of CSS in all browsers, but sometimes JavaScript will be able to get us further faster. It's not an answer to your question. I guess I'm basically saying it's up to the community. There's a complex organism out there. It was easier in CSS1. Then we were kind of 2 guys in an office. I sometimes wish I was back there again, but you know, it's great to have seen so much interest in it as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, my question about Opera browser. If I correctly remember, a couple years ago, Opera has changed its engine, right?
Yes.
To the WebKit, and
Yes.
I'm just wondering, why did they do that?
Yes. Good question. You have great questions. Okay, so it's true. We changed it to WebKit, and then a few months later, WebKit was split into Blink and WebKit. Google does Blink, and Apple continues with WebKit. I think the most important reason for us to change was that we continuously had problems with pages that didn't work in Opera, as people told us. Maybe they had a bank account with a bank in Switzerland or somewhere, you know, where we couldn't really test it because we didn't have a bank account in Switzerland. We couldn't log in and debug even. So we had a lot of people reporting, oh, I really like Opera, but it doesn't work with my bank, or it doesn't work on this page. And it was a little bit, you know, they were probably right. There were things that didn't work. Sometimes we would say, you know, no, we do it right. We follow the standards here. The guys who write the web page, they don't follow the standards. So we fought that battle for many years and said, you know, no, the world should change. You know, Opera is the best browser. The world must accommodate. But we were never able to convince enough web developers, especially in the US, I think. In Russia, it was okay. We had a critical mass of users here. We always had very solid Opera community here in Russia. We're very happy about that. But in the States, for example, we never got to that level where developers had to test with Opera. So we had a lot of reports that we were missing out on users because of our web engine. So we came to a stage where we said, you know, maybe the engine isn't really what we should focus on so much anymore. We had 50 or 100 guys, somewhere between 50 and 100 people working on it. It was expensive to maintain. And we could instead put those efforts into building a more solid engine in WebKit. So we decided to instead to contribute to the open source projects. We're now contributing to Blink. We are, after Google, we're the biggest contributor of code to Blink. So our programmers find it also more meaningful when their efforts, their fixes can reach a lot more people. But it was sad. It was a difficult decision to make because we had that browser engine for many years, and it was a great engine. It was faster and smaller and better, I think, than the alternative. Blink is great too, and you can do incredible things. You can do things in Blink that you could never do in Opera. So it was, but it's one of these design. I mean, you will face many of these design issues out there. Whether you should throw away code, write new code, or continue debugging and working with the old code. It's never one right answer. You always had to weigh those, and in the end, we came to, let's do it. And I must say, I think it's been good for us. I think not having to deal with the page doesn't work in Opera. That's so much of a relief, and we can concentrate on things like we presented here today that I think are truly meaningful to users. That was a long answer. Yeah. One more question. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to come back to the story of with Chicago buses and Opera Mini.
Yeah.
Say after this presentation there is a sudden bump of Opera Mini usage here
Great.
in Russia.
We'll see it in the statistics.
Yeah, and then logs leak. Will journalists find out that suddenly Norwegians are interested in Russian transport, or do you have now servers spread out around the world?
Yeah, we have servers spread out around the world now. I don't quite remember exactly where they are, but we have them in at least 3 continents, so that you can no longer detect that. I don't think we even have them in Norway anymore. That's how the cloud has come to be, The cloud has changed a lot of things. You can just put it out there. Yeah.
Еще вопросы будут?
Okay. Any more questions? We have 10 more minutes. You want to see some slides? You want to see some more slides? Or you want to go home? You want to see some slides? Okay, let's see some slides. Okay.
Remember those giveaways as well.
Oh, we have giveaways. We have giveaways. Wait. We had to do this. This was for those who asked questions. You asked the first question. There you are. And you asked a question. And let's see. I know you asked the question, but maybe there were one guy before you. There you are. And then was this? It was you. There we are. So there were 4. That was perfect. Wonderful. These are some small Opera items that I hope you will enjoy. Okay, so I'm going to say a little bit more about the future of CSS, since you asked about that. Let's see. Multi-column layout is a feature that I think will be very important. It's part of the CSS. It's a module in CSS 3, and it's a so-called candidate recommendation, which means that it's ready to be implemented. And all browsers pretty much have a good implementation of that now, including Internet Explorer and Link and WebKit. And you can see it quite often in Wikipedia pages where the list of references, they save space by having it like that. And also you will need it if you go to the book world, you will actually need multi-column layout because books are often laid out in columns. And you can even think of each page here as one column that you had to end, and it continues on the next page. In addition, in printed books, you have some other things that have been hard to do before we added some of these special features. For example, page numbers. You have these things on the side. This is not so hard anymore. This is actually quite normal in a web design too, that you have these side notes. But you also have the running headers and footers. You can see this is from a book I wrote about CSS, and we actually wanted to make a point of it and make sure that we could format this book in CSS alone. So we used a program called Prince, which converts HTML and CSS into a PDF file. And this PDF file we were able to save and send to the printer. So that worked. But this is really hard to do, actually. If you look at this, this is the table of contents. And you can see that it has references to page numbers. And these page numbers cannot be we cannot put this in the source code, because we don't know what page this chapter or this subheading will end up on. That depends on the size of the page and the size of the font, etc. So actually these had to be computed at the time of formatting. So the way we do that is that we have a hyperlink from this string to the start of that section. And then we say, instead of showing it as a hyperlink, you should show it as a page number. So that, using those features, we're able to do page numbers. We also have a way of styling them so that you can say, here's Latin page numbers and there's Roman page numbers. So books have a long history of trying to, let me see if I can get to that. I think I have one with me. Books have a long history in our civilizations. It's pretty much been built on books. This is a book written by a famous Norwegian author, the only famous Norwegian author we have, Henrik Ibsen. He wrote a lot of poetry and he wrote plays. This is one of his books that I have copied on trying to copy every line, every page, even find the font that he used to try to make a replica of the first edition of Henrik Ibsen's book. And I've done it all in HTML and CSS. So that's a way of ensuring that HTML and CSS can do the things that the book printers have been doing for centuries. And I think it's important that as we move further, as we advance civilizations, we don't forget how things have worked in the past. This is the first book that was printed in a semi-industrial manner. This book was done by Johannes Gutenberg, who lived in Germany in the 1400s. And he invented the printing press. Let me see if I can get to him here. Whoops, there we are. Johannes Gutenberg invented the printing press in the 1460s. And I think if we try to see what inventions have done most for our civilizations, I think the web will be up there. And the only thing that we can really compare it to is the printing press. I don't think radio or TV are big enough. I think they're further down the list. But the printing press really changed Europe. Because before the printing press, Europe was kind of a backwaters place. By having a printing press, we were able to distribute information quite inexpensively. He started with the Bible, but other people did other things. And as a result of having the printing press, we had the Reformation in Europe. And we had the Industrial Revolution. We had the Renaissance. None of those would have been possible without having access to books. And books hadn't been possible without the invention of this technology. So I think people ask me what's ahead. I sometimes ask myself, how long is this thing going to live? How long is the web going to last? And that's when I look back to Gutenberg and said, Gutenberg invented this 500 years ago, and we can still read his book today if we had one. These are very rare. I don't know if there is one in Russia. There are some libraries in the world that have these still. It's a beautiful book. If you ever have a chance to see one, you should see it. You probably can't read it. It's very hard to read the Latin here, but just looking how beautiful it is. And I haven't been able to replicate it in CSS yet. I've been able to do Ibsen's book, but this is still on the to-do list. But I still think we should use that as sort of a measuring stick. We've had this book for 500 years, and we can still read it. And I think that the web pages we write today, those will also be readable in 500 years. So I think that the web will last 500 years. The CSS code that you write today, somebody will be able to read that in 500 years, I believe. I'm willing to make a bet on that. Of course, I'm not going to be around. Nobody can tell me I'm wrong. But who's with me? Somebody's nodding, somebody's saying, yeah? What do you think? Is it going to are they going to read our code 500 years from now?
It will be transformed.
It will be transformed? Yeah? You think it's going to be? Yeah.
It will be the same thing, but it will look different.
I think the languages will evolve. But will the files that we write now, will they be able to, if they go into a computer store, if there are computer stores 500 years from now, if they have a common computer 500 years, will that computer be able to read HTML and CSS?
We're not able to store information for such long periods, like 500 years.
I think we will be able to. I think we can copy files. Hard disks won't live for 500 years, but if you take them along with you, then I think you can preserve the files.
We should have people who will be instantly copying the files from one institute to another.
Yes. But the cloud will do it for us.
Yeah,
Maybe. All right. It's an interesting debating point. Maybe if you have a beer later tonight, you can continue the discussions there. Thank you so much for coming. It's been very interesting to be with you.